China's social credit system is possibly the most dangerous threat to human liberty in history. This is because, when combined with the control of schooling, it provides the most powerful means of speech control and thought control in all of human history. It also provides a blueprint for other countries to implement similar systems either overtly or covertly. The threat of a social credit system doesn't change depending on how altruistic or vicious the overseeing body may be. Every government body will eventually use and abuse its authority and abilities. It is simply a matter of time. That is why inalienable rights should exist, because human nature means systems naturally grow and the power of governing bodies naturally grows. Governing bodies will always seek to aggrandize themselves at the expense of the individual. As dangerous as social credit is, I think it became inevitable the moment social media was invented. The fact that so much information can be harvested all at once makes it unavoidable that the data will be compiled and used eventually. As soon as social media companies realized that the data they had was valuable, and that other companies like credit card companies and credit agencies already had data they could aggregate with their own, the data mining industry was born. For a bureaucrat, social activist, or a blend of both, as can be seen in the CCP, the temptation to use personal data for political ends is inescapable. The core difference between capitalists and statists, like socialists and communists, is that capitalists believe you cannot change a person's nature, while statists believe you can control how people behave and think to a point where you actually change their nature. China, implementing their social credit system, not only pioneers the concept for other more free, and I use that term loosely, nations, but it also gets people in the free world used to the idea of governing bodies gathering and using such data while simultaneously providing an extreme example that people can point to and say, sure, it's a lot of data, but we aren't tyrants, it isn't nearly as much as China. It normalizes the idea that government can control what you think, do, and say. Because if it was really a problem, we would hear about the abuses of power and see people post about it on social media, right? Of course, this ignores the fact that you don't have freedom of speech in China and can't post anything outside the party line, let alone criticize the system itself. This also applies to the media. After all, if you refer to Taiwan as a country, you have to publicly apologize to China. You don't need a centralized system for what amounts to social credit to exist. If enough companies are data mining your activity, they can disadvantage you in a way that may seem organic. Social media sites don't give your posts natural visibility. Lenders think your political beliefs make you a high-risk investment. Government institutions classify you as extremist, undesirable, or simply not in a preferred group. The list of ways in which your recorded data can, will, and has been used against you is endless. Now imagine the US follows in the footsteps of China. They don't even need to do something overtly. They can hide it in some national defense bill or anti-terrorism bill. They can classify their activities as national security, or even just hide it as some counter-crime proposal. The fact is, it would not be hard at all for someone with the right credentials to get a hold of your social media activity. Even private message activity, your credit history, your spending history, your travel history, and more. In fact, most web marketing and social media companies are already pulling much of this data together in order to better target advertisements. Couple this with the fact that a new law could give the government access to the mic in your phone, a computer could constantly be cross-referencing what you say with thousands of flag words, and you have a situation that is primed for exploitation. Personal credit relies on how much of a risk companies believe you are when extending loans and credit. It is very believable that a credit card company could expect to be able to run your personal history through a database that resembles a social credit system to decide whether you are a stable individual for a good investment. In fact, there are already changes in how credit laws work and how credit scores are calculated. These changes are promoted as ways of upgrading the system so it doesn't rely on such brutal, hard data. It sounds altruistic, but all it does is make it more subjective, and anytime anything is subjective, it can be easily abused. After all, if you were extending credit and it was legal for you to get access to someone's personal history, why wouldn't you? It makes perfect sense, even from a non-corrupt perspective, to want to know if a potential customer has 3 illegitimate children, believes in sovereign citizen philosophy, or has been called Nazi a dozen times. No individual component of a social credit system is inherently malicious. It is the combination of that data and the fact that humans will always abuse power that makes it dangerous. You may think I'm being hyperbolic, but no government bureaucratic system exists that has not been abused. Extrapolate that out to more countries than just the US, and the record gets even worse. The ability to fight hate speech turns into overt censorship and control over public discourse. The ability to print money turns into a dangerous level of inflation. Civil forfeiture to fight drug cartels turns into outright theft. No-knock raids and qualified immunity turn into borderline murder without consequences. Regulation of tax-exempt status turns into delays for nonprofit status until after elections. Land permits turn into graft and corruption. Civil planning turns into manipulation and extortion. After all, a permit is simply the government confiscating your rights and selling them back to you at a profit and with strings attached. Even something as mundane as representation can be corrupt. Gerrymandering is where you use bureaucratic power to draw electoral districts to ensure you always have a majority of elected officials regardless of what people want. The point is that anything the government does will eventually be corrupted. Combine this with a social credit system with 2 additional factors and you will have complete social tyranny. First is a school system that is run by, funded by, and designed for government loyalty. Whoever funds a system controls the system. Government funding always comes with strings attached. It is irrefutable that the public education system today leans to one side, and that is entirely understandable. If you are raised in a system supported by and funded by the state, you are going to view the state in a favorable light. In a small way, the government takes the place of the community and the family. It is no wonder that when people leave these institutions, they are thinking of the government when they speak about the community, never realizing that there's a distinction between the two and that one can exploit and abuse the other. Our system does not teach individualism, so why should we expect people trained by that system to understand individual rights, the danger of bloated government, or even the basics of financial life like taxes, rent, and budgeting? Because a loyal citizen is the priority of the school system, not a competent citizen. The final component to a social tyranny is the lack of balanced media. This subject deserves a video of its own, but there is a strong indication that the media leans heavily in one direction. It is also interesting to note that most modern reporters agree with the majority of the censorship and thought control that is being implemented throughout the West. Technology and social media are not slowing down, and a part of the problem is that for most of this, your consent is not required. Simply existing and using social media, credit cards, travel systems, and other platforms in many legal contexts is considered implicit consent. Social medias are going to continue to find ways to link your data and use it to turn a profit, and governments will continue to try to use that for their own benefit. The only way to slow down our headlong charge towards social credit is to somehow block the aggregation of this data. The problem is that most of the data a country or company would need to create their own version of social credit is publicly available. A search spider can easily dig through everything you have ever posted online, and your credit is available through several agencies that major organizations can buy access to. For all we know, a social credit already exists, and the only thing that is holding it back is the attempt to keep that system secret. I personally don't think we are there yet. People just aren't that good at keeping this sort of secret, but it is certainly possible, especially in the near future. However, if your data exists and is trackable, I think social credit may be equally as inevitable as it is a violation of human rights. And aggregated social credit and basic human rights like free speech are mutually exclusive. Please like and subscribe. My social media links are in the description, as well as links to my books.